Good boy, Tucker.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Work smarter where you want.
Consistency is key.
And remember, if it's not in Redtail, it never happened.
This is learning at its most fun.
Thank you for joining us today. We are in part 3 of our workflow series. So today we are going to talk about workflows in action. So if you haven't joined us for the part 1 or part 2 of the series, just going to give you a quick recap. In part 1, we learned about the whiteboarding process, how to begin a workflow process. And then in part 2, we took that workflow process that we created, and we went ahead and translated it into Redtail in the form of what we call a workflow template. In today's series, we are going to discuss how we're going to take that template and put it into action inside Redtail CRM. And I'm going to do that by answering 5 essential questions. The first is, how do you start the workflow? The second is, how do you view the workflow? The third is, how do I complete the workflow? The fourth is, how do I receive notifications about the workflow? And then 5, how do I report upon an existing or previous workflow? All right, so let's go ahead and jump over into Redtail CRM. Check my screen share. And here we are. We are in Redtail CRM. Today we are on the Today page. And let's go ahead and start with the first question. And that question is, how do I start a workflow? Okay. Before we begin any kind of workflow starting, we need to first make sure that we activate the templates that we created in part 2. So let's go ahead and click on our name in the top right-hand corner. And we are going to choose the section called Manage Your Account. Under the Manage Your Account section, we're going to go to the Manage Templates tab and choose Workflow Templates. From here, we'll see the 3 templates that we've been working on as part of the series. The first thing to do is going to be to edit each one. And we are going to change the status from under construction to active. And then update our template. So we'll do that for the other 2. Edit, status, active, update template. And the last one, edit, status, active, and update. And the reason we did that is because we had our templates in under construction status, which means that they weren't quite built yet and ready to be used, but now they are. So now we're going to go ahead and initiate them into active status. In case you're wondering, inactive status means a completed workflow that we're just no longer using. So now that we have the workflow template activated, we can go and begin using it to start a new workflow. The first way to start a new workflow in your database is to click on the Quick Add option here in the top right-hand corner of your database. You see here, we have an option for workflows. I'll go ahead and choose that option, and the first question that I'm prompted to answer is, which template do I want to go ahead and create? For this one, I'll use the 2020 seminar workflow. It's going to ask me about a contact name. Because this is a seminar workflow and not necessarily tied to a contact record, I'll go ahead and leave it blank. The team has already pre-filled in from my template category, and then I'll just go ahead and set the target date for the seminar. So I'm going to put it next Thursday. And I will create the new workflow. That's it. It went ahead and created the workflow for us. Now you'll notice that it took me to this webinar page, and that's intentional. Remember that a workflow template is intended to capture what happens most of the time. That means once we put a workflow template into action, we have the ability to go back and to adjust the workflow as needed. For example, I might look at my seminar workflow process here, and I might know that Paul, he's out for vacation this week. So probably not best to assign him creating the mail merge invites. So instead, what I can do is choose the drop-down option here, edit the task, and I'm going to go ahead and assign that to myself. So that way I can ensure that it gets done even though Paul's not with us in the office today. The other thing I can do is I can make adjustments to tasks themselves. If I need to add additional tasks, I can choose to add a new task, or I can delete away existing tasks. Like, for example, if for this seminar you're not going to be doing any catering, I can go ahead and delete the catering task away. Now remember, this isn't going to make any changes to our template that we've already created. It's just going to make changes to the workflow that's happening as is right now. Okay. So now that we're finished, we can go ahead and click away, and that workflow is now in action. All right, let's talk about option number 2 for adding workflows. The next thing we can do is add a workflow from a contact record. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and search for a contact record. Today, I'm going to use Tim Taylor as an example. And we can begin a workflow from the contact record. From the contact record, there's 2 ways. The first of which is just like we did on the Today page. We can go ahead and choose the Quick Add option and choose the workflow options. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out is you notice that Tim Taylor's name is already pre-filled into the contact name field. And that's because we're beginning the workflow on his contact record. Therefore, it's recommended best practice and a way to save yourself some typing is to go to the contact record to begin the workflow if that workflow is pertinent to a specific contact record. So in this case, we'll be using a client contact information update. And so because I'm updating a specific contact, I'm going to want to put a contact in there. Thankfully, Redtail's already linked it for us. And so now I just go ahead and enter in my target date and create the new workflow. Another way to begin a workflow from a contact record is I'll go back to Tim's record here. It's from the workflow tab. So you can see here, it automatically took me here. But if I go to the tab here on the left and I scroll down to the workflow section, it's going to take me to this page here. And I have an option here to add a workflow. So all I need to do is create a new workflow, and it's going to prompt me the screen to create a new workflow. Notice again, Tim's record is already linked because we are starting the workflow from Tim's contact record. Okay. The fourth option for adding a new workflow is with the workflow tab. So when you go to the dude here in the top left-hand corner, it's going to open up this tab, and we have a tab dedicated specifically to workflows within the database. You can go ahead and choose that, and you'll notice we have a button here for new workflow. Just go ahead and click it, and we can begin the new workflow. So in this case, if I want to do a client meeting, I'll go ahead and choose the client meeting. It pre-fills most of the information. Notice contact name is no longer entered, right? Because we're not beginning from a contact record. And so now I'll need to just go ahead and type in the name of the person that I want to link, choose them from the dropdown, and set my target date. There we go. New meeting created. So to recap, there's 4 different ways to add a workflow. The first is using the quick add option from any page inside your Redtail CRM. You can also do it from the workflow tab here on the left-hand menu and choosing new workflow. And then lastly, you can add it from the contact record by either quick adding from the contact record or going to the workflow tab of the contact record and adding it from there. The benefit of starting with the contact record is it's automatically linked to said contact record. Great, so now we have 3 new workflows in action. Let's go ahead and talk about how do we view them. Okay? So the first way we view them is on the Today page. So we'll open up the Today page, and you'll notice I have a big data icon here in the top right-hand corner for workflow tasks. Okay, if I go ahead and click on it, it's going to go ahead and open up my workflow tasks that are currently assigned to my username. In this case, Tucker McLaughlin. These are all of the workflow tasks specific, my workflow tasks, to Tucker McLaughlin. Okay. One recommendation that I have for you is when logging into your CRM in the morning or whenever it is that you log in, I recommend opening this tab in a new tab. And what that does is it allows me to be able to view my workflow tasks as I'm going throughout my day without necessarily having to visit that field every time. I have an open field here where I can swap back between my contact records and my calendars and all the different features that I use in Redtail CRM, and then quickly just tab over to the workflow tasks as I'm beginning to complete them. Okay. The second place we can see workflow tasks is on the Today page under the workflow task to do today. Now, this is very specific to only the workflow tasks that have a due date, and that due date is listed as the current date. This means that workflow tasks that were due yesterday or workflow tasks that are due tomorrow will not appear on this menu. Only the workflow tasks that are have a set due date, and that due date is set for the current date. Now, if I wanted to see my workflow tasks that were due yesterday or tomorrow, I can scroll down and choose the option here to see view all my workflow tasks. And you might see that this menu looks a little bit familiar, looks a little bit like this one, and that's because it is the same menu. And here we can go and we can see a list of our tasks, what is due and when it is due, and I can even filter it to view for the most late or most furthest out. So here's a list of all of my workflow tasks filtered, and I can see all of my workflow tasks that are due any day. Another place that we can go to view our workflow tasks is our Redtail calendar. We can go to the tab here and open up the calendar. Just a second here to load. Okay, and so you'll see here the workflow tasks with the bolded due are indicating that these are in fact workflow tasks. They look a little bit different than our activities, these guys here, and we can even have them appear in a separate color. So our workflow task here are showing in this dark aqua color, and it's letting us know of the workflow tasks that are due today, workflow tasks that were due on the 13th, and then I can even scroll forward to see workflow tasks coming up next week. Now, if you're not, for whatever reason, seeing workflow tasks, what you can do is choose the action icon here and choose to show workflow tasks, or you can enable it so that way your calendar defaults to just show workflow tasks from your preferences menu. The next place that we can go to see workflow tasks is on the contact record. So I'm going to go to the recently viewed and open up Tim Taylor's contact record. If I scroll down to the very bottom of the home page of his contact record, scrolling down, I notice there is a menu here for open workflow tasks. Now, these are all of the workflow tasks that are assigned to this contact record, regardless of who they're specifically assigned to. So I can see both Tucker's, any other users in my database that have open workflow tasks. I can view this menu here to see all of the open workflow tasks that we currently have for Tim Taylor specifically. And that's it. So those are the 4 ways that we can see workflow tasks that we need to get done inside Redtail CRM. To recap, we have the workflow tasks bid data icon here that I recommend opening up in a new tab. We can also go to the workflow task to do today section, as well as our calendar. And then lastly, the contact record by scrolling all the way down to the bottom to view open workflow tasks. Okay. Now let's talk about doing something about those workflow tasks. So we know how we can see the workflow tasks. Let's talk about how do we go about completing it. So first up, we have our active workflow tasks here. This one's pretty simple. All you need to do is just go ahead and hit the complete button next to the workflow task that you want to go ahead and complete. So if I click this complete button, you'll notice now that workflow task has disappeared from my workflow task to do. Same thing applies on the today page for workflow tasks that are due today. You'll notice they have become equipped with a complete button. All I need to do is hit the complete button, and that is going to complete that workflow task. Interesting thing happened here. We have reached the end of a workflow step, and now it's prompting me to enter in a workflow step note. And go ahead and choose the update here. And so we could say verified information with client. So the workflow task here was to verify the information with client. If I need to add any additional notes to that, I can go ahead and put it into the step notes, and it's going to save that as part of the workflow. Okay, so I'll go ahead and complete the step. And now it's going to move forward to the next step in the workflow. Okay. We also have the calendar, of course. If we want to view and complete workflow tasks on the calendar, we don't necessarily have a convenient complete button here, but what we can do is we can go ahead and click on the workflow task, and that's going to open up the workflow where we also now have options to complete things. Another fun trick that I wanted to show you is how to reschedule workflows if needed. So for example, we have this seminar workflow here, and all of our workflow tasks are set for the current due date. We have 1 week to prepare for this seminar that is happening on April 23rd. Now, what if, for whatever reason, we needed to push that seminar forward, like we needed to reschedule it? We can go ahead and click on the target date here, and we can adjust the target date to a date in the future or even more recently. In this case, I'll go ahead and push it to the 24th. And what you'll notice happen is now all of my workflow tasks have now adjusted. They've all moved one day forward into April 17th. And the reason for that is because these are all set to happen 1 week prior to the target date. So an easy way, rather than needing to adjust the due date on each individual task like this, I can just change the target date and the workflow will adjust accordingly. All right. Talked about the bottom of that contact record. We have Tim Taylor's contact record here. In this case, we also have a convenient option for completing workflow tasks. Just need to hit that complete button, and then that will go ahead and complete out the workflow task. All right. Another convenient place to go and look at our workflows is under the workflow tab. So go ahead and open up the menu here, go down to the workflow task. And again, this is going to show us all of the workflows that are available database-wide. So every active or even completed workflow in the database we can see from accessing the workflow tab. Okay, just you say this is like the big picture, right? We can see everything that's happening. And then of course, if we need to make changes or adjustments or even completions within workflows, all we need to go ahead and do is open up that workflow. And we can go and hit the complete button here. And it looks like I reached the end of a step, so it's going to prompt me for an outcome. I'm going to go ahead and add some step notes here. We're going to say, meeting with Tim was awesome. And we're going to move forward to the next step, which is the follow-up. Okay, so to recap, if you're working on workflows and need to complete them, you can go to your Today page and check out the big data icon for workflow tasks. You can view them right here on your workflow task to do today section. You can open up your calendar and click into the workflow to complete the workflow tasks there. You can open up the contact record that workflow is assigned to, and you can complete the workflows there. Or you can go to your workflows tab, see a big picture of all the workflows happening in the database, and make changes as necessary. Another frequently asked question I get is, how do I receive notifications about my workflow? So this is particular for people that might be just starting out with workflows. They might not be in the habit of going to all those different places to check their workflows, or be in the natural rhythm of knowing that they need to log into Redtail CRM to complete their workflow tasks. One way that we can manage that is with what are called workflow notifications. So workflow notifications are found under the preference menu. All we need to do is go to our name here in the top right and choose the preferences option. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down all the way to the options where I see notification options. Okay. So we have notification options specific to activities, but we also have workflow notifications. Okay. Now they're divided into two sets. First is as a workflow attendee, and the second is as a workflow owner. Now, let me go ahead and explain the difference. A workflow attendee is anybody that has a task inside that workflow. So for example, those workflows that we created had Tucker listed as a participant, somebody that was assigned a task in that workflow. And therefore, Tucker is a workflow attendee. Meaning, if Tucker has this turned on to yes, when that workflow gets assigned, he's going to receive an email notification notifying him that that workflow has been assigned to him. The same thing can be true if there are workflow changes or if that workflow is completed. Now, that's very different than a workflow owner. A workflow owner, you can think of as kind of the overseer of the workflow process. Notice when we go and add a new workflow, it asks us about the owner here. Now, a lot of times that's going to be pre-filled in from the template, but what we can do is we can set a user or a team as the owner of the workflow, and then this specific person or individuals will receive notifications about that workflow. They don't necessarily need to be part of the workflow. They could be in some kind of management capacity, just overseeing that workflow and want to stay in the know about that workflow. And so for that, we can set them as the owner. So that way they're receiving notifications. Now, if you get enough emails as it is already and you don't want any more emails in your life, don't worry. You always have the option to go ahead and edit these settings. So I can turn these off to no, and there will be no email notifications. But under my experience of working with offices and implementing workflows, I highly recommend that when you're first starting out with workflows, have your team go to their preference menus and turn on these email notifications. It's going to be very essential until, again, you develop that natural rhythm of looking at your workflow tasks. All right. And so that brings us to our last question, which is how do I report upon existing or previous workflows? And so for that, I'm going to go ahead and choose the dude here in the top left, and we are going to choose the report section. So Redtail has reports specific to workflows. If I scroll down to the bottom here, we have two different workflow reports. We have the workflow report and the workflow task report. Now, they have similar names, but they report on very different things. Workflow report is going to be very high level, right? Similar to the workflow tab, where we see a list of all of the existing or completed workflows that are in the database. Whereas the workflow task report is going to get very specific. It's going to look specifically at what tasks are currently in action or needed to be completed. Okay, so let's take first a look at the workflow report. I'm going to go ahead and open it up in a new tab here. And we'll go ahead and open it up. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do with the workflow report is we're going to set our filter options. We're going to tell Redtail what we want to report upon. So for example, if I wanted to see all of my current client review workflows, right? So I would go to my client review workflow 2020, and then I can go ahead and look at only my open workflows. These are workflow processes that are in progress. I'm going to apply the filters, and it's going to go ahead and get me back 6 results. So right now, my office is currently working on 6 client reviews, and here are the 6 contacts that we're doing client reviews for. Okay. We can also use this report to report in the past. So for example, I can choose this filter here, and now I can see how many client review workflows did my office complete in the year of 2019. So I can go backwards in time here to set my filters. January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. I'll go ahead and choose the workflow templates that I want to report on. In this case, I'll choose both of them since it looks like we did a client review update in 2020. And then I just want to report on the ones that we've completed. So that's workflows that have seen the process all the way through or are now completed status. So apply the filters, and that's going to generate a rate of support. So it looks like we did 11 client review workflows in 2019. And here is a list of all of the workflows that we did. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump over next to the workflow task report. And we'll see the key differences. This way. Okay, awesome. So you can see here with the workflow task report, I'm reporting on the specific task rather than the workflow itself. So even though this is technically all one workflow for Tim Taylor, it's showing it as 5 different line items, and that's because it's listing out each individual task. So an example report that you might use the workflow task report for is we can set the filter for here. We can see how many workflows, tasks do we need to complete this week. So I can go here, set my filters for Sunday to Saturday, and I'm going to go ahead and look at my open workflow tasks that are assigned to all teams and all users. Okay, so we'll apply the filter, and there we go. So we have 11 workflow tasks assigned to my team, and here's a list of them ready to go. From here, I can push these to an Excel spreadsheet, or I can even put them to a PDF file that I can easily print out. But the key takeaway here is that now we can report on the specific tasks that we need to get done. We can also do the same thing in the past as well. So if we want to look at, for example, let's see how many tasks Tucker completed in Q1. So I'll go ahead and set the filters here for Q1, and I'm going to look specifically at Tucker's username, and we'll go ahead and show just the completed activities for Tucker in quarter one. So we'll apply the filters here. Oh, wow, looks like Tucker was not very productive in quarter number one. Let me go ahead and extend this out just a little bit further here so we get some results back. Oops, I should have set my filter, set it to open only. All right. Month of April, Tucker, let's look at these other filters. There we go. Okay, so now we can see a picture of what it is that Tucker has completed in this given month, or still, in some cases, needs to complete in this given month. So that's how you might use those two reports to report back upon workflows. There are two other things that I wanted to show as far as reporting back on workflows. We can show completed contact records, completed workflows on the contact record. And to do that, I'll go ahead and open up Tim Taylor's contact record here. And we are going to open up his notes tab. So go to Tim Taylor, we'll go to the notes section. And just like how activities, once completed, become notes, so too do workflows. And I can see which workflows have by choosing the filter for workflow summary. Okay, apply the filter here. And now I can look at all of the workflows that have been completed for this specific contact record. So we can see that we did an onboarding process and a client review, and it's going to list what workflow we did, who oversaw it, when was it completed. And then the last reporting capability I wanted to point out for workflows is called the summary notes report. Okay, and those are found under the workflow tab. So for these, what we can do is we can see the notes that we would have entered in as outcomes when we were prompted to do so. So for example, while I was working through Tim's onboarding process, there were a couple notes that I went ahead and put in to that workflow process as part of my outcomes. And if I wanted to view those, I can go to the workflow tab here, look at either the active or completed workflow, and choose the action icon to the left of it. From here, I can choose the summary notes report, and it's going to go ahead and let me see all of the different notes that happen as part of that workflow process. So if I need to do a check-in or look back upon how a certain workflow process would have went specifically, I can open up the summary notes and see specifically what happened during that workflow. Okay. All right. And that takes us to the end of this session. So to recap, today we talked about how to view our workflows, how to start the workflow, how to complete workflow tasks, how to receive notifications about our workflows, and then lastly, how to report back upon those workflows. In the next session, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can enhance some of these processes and in some cases even make them automatic. So you're certainly going to want to tune in for that.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.